Shalom, you're listening to On Israel, the Al Monitor podcast brought to you from Tel Aviv. I'm Ben Caspit. Israeli forces along the border with Lebanon have been in a state of top alert for the past 3 months. The heightened alert over such a long time is unusual, to say the least. Meanwhile, Israel is waging a war of nerves against Hezbollah and its leader, Hassan Nasrallah. It all began on July 20th with an airstrike on the Damascus International Airport attributed to the Israeli Air Force. Among the casualties was a Hezbollah operative, and Nasrallah swore that the organization would avenge his death by taking the life of an Israeli soldier. Since then, each side has been flexing its muscles, and no one knows how long this will last. The tensions have survived the heavy tragedy of the explosion that destroyed the Beirut port in August, as well as several retaliations attempted by Hezbollah, which Israeli troops foiled. Our guest today is a decorated general who holds a reserve commission as Deputy Chief of the IDF's Northern Command. General Yitzhak Jerry Gershon, one of the most experienced and valued among Israel's current generation of generals, was among a handful of senior officers who openly expressed support for the annexation plan that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced in January. The annexation idea generated great hopes on the Israeli political right until it was foiled by the so-called Abraham agreements between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and the Bahrain under the auspices of President Donald Trump. We will ask General Gershon about this deal, about sovereignty in return for peace, about the tensions along the northern border, about the fact that the IDF, the strongest military force in the Middle East, has essentially been cowering for months for fear of Hezbollah, and also about the handling of the coronavirus crisis. Among his many jobs, General Gershon also served as head of the Home Front Command, which is now helping deal with the epidemic that is threatening the collapse of Israel's economy. We will be back with General Gershon after a brief commercial break.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on Israel with Ben Caspit, and on the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Shalom, General Yitzhak Jerry Gershon, and thank you for joining the Al Monitor podcast on Israel. Shalom, Jerry.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Jerry, let's start of all things with the annexation. You were one of the few generals who expressed open support for the plan to impose Israeli sovereignty over Israeli settlements in Judea and Samaria. Most of your colleagues in the defense establishment, past and present, thought the cost of the plan would be far higher than it was worth. Eventually, the plan was put aside and was replaced by agreements with the Gulf states. Today, looking back, what do you think of this trade-off? Are you sorry?
Oh, no. These peace agreements have a huge potential for a geo-strategic change. They have the potential to affect the security, stability, and prosperity of the region. So in that regard, they are very, very important for the state of Israel. However, the decision about the future of the area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea has strategic implications, especially Israel's capability to defend itself on her own. In October, just as a reminder, in October 1995, immediately after the Oslo Accords, our Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was the one who said in the Knesset that the Jordan Valley is non-negotiable. So these generals that opposed the idea talked at the same time how fragile the Middle East is. We remember that our best allies in the region were Iran and Turkey. In other words, agreements as important as they are, based on common interests, while applying sovereignty is to secure the future of the state of Israel for the next 100 years or more. More than that, applying sovereignty is to ensure that future generations do not need to deal with a hostile entity in Judea and Samaria like what we have in Gaza today. It is important to understand that we mean applying sovereignty over territory without annexing even a single Palestinian.
You mean, I guess, that we are applying sovereignty only on the Jewish settlements without taking responsibility to the millions of Palestinians that are living there. But I want to follow up on this on the important things that you just said in two questions. First, you remember that after Menachem Begin applied sovereignty over the Golan Heights, at least two prime ministers, Yitzhak Rabin and Benjamin Netanyahu, negotiated with Hafez al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad peace with giving back the Golan Heights. So it's not guaranteeing anything. And the second question, General Gershon, is, in principle, why do we need to annex the Jordan Valley when, in fact, the IDF is deployed there and no one in Israel even considers evacuating it? Why endanger the fragile peace with Jordan, which is such as an important asset for Israel's national security?
So changes in the Middle East are so fast. But let's start with the second part of your question.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. There is no doubt that the peace with Jordan is very important for Israel as well as for Jordan. The question is not the status quo, but when and how we can put an end to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not that we woke up one morning and decided to put sovereignty on the table. It was part of the current US administration deal for the Middle East. This administration, we have to be honest, has introduced the first time an innovative plan that addresses both our national interests as well as facts on the ground, like that we have 2 million or more Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria, and does not recycle plans that have so far failed. The plan was to start with the Palestinians and then to continue with the Gulf states. Since the Palestinians refused to come to the table, surprise, the president's team and the prime minister changed the course, and thank God it worked. So in the end of the day, I can promise you, we'll have sovereignty over strategic areas, including most of the settlements, and we'll have peace with the Arab and Muslim world. The only question is, or maybe it is right to say, hopefully, the Palestinians will join this peace train.
And I think I agree with you on this point, because till now, the Palestinians refused to almost all the peace proposals, very generous proposals they got, believing that time is working towards them. And now I think with the Trump administration's deal of the century, and now the Gulf agreements, I think that they start to realize the time is not working for them, but maybe against them, and they cannot go on missing every opportunity on the way. But I want to switch, General Gershon, to one of your best expertise as a deputy command of the Northern Command in Israel, deputy commander. And let's talk about Hezbollah. For a minute there we thought that the Beirut explosion would weaken Nasrallah and send him back to his bunker. But that did not happen, and the IDF has been on very high alert for 3 months because Nasrallah keeps threatening to kill an Israeli soldier. Isn't it strange that the strongest military in the Middle East goes on the defensive because of threats by the leader of a terrorist organization?
Wow, it is a very interesting question. I would say, first of all, the IDF deals with a large number of arenas simultaneously. In Gaza, Judea and Samaria, Syria, places where silence is better for all. Therefore, I would not say that the IDF is on a high alert. It is true that the Northern Command protects the border with Lebanon in a way that matches the level of the threat. This is exactly what was expected from our troops, to thwart the threat, charge a price without degenerating the region into war, also prepared for the possibility of misjudgment by the Hezbollah leader, as happened in summer 2006.
After the Second Lebanon War, we got a very strong deterrence with Hezbollah, and Nasrallah was down in his bunker. But in the last year or two, after he was winning the war in Syria, now it seems that he is looking for engagement with us. And I ask you, the question is, what's the level of are we ready? How is the Northern Command ready for a possible Hezbollah effort to take over maybe a piece of land in northern Israel? And especially, how do we have an answer to the 200,000 missiles and rockets that Nasrallah keeps in his bunkers in Lebanon?
So let's divide it into two parts. First of all, continue to the last question, because there is a relation between the two. It is important to know that the FIDF's freedom of action in the northern arena has not been violated, and all its action derive from the strategic purpose that we must not allow Iran to build another front against Israel in Syria, and do everything possible to prevent the entry of sophisticated, accurate weapons into the region. Most importantly, the whole world is currently busy with COVID-19. Lebanon on the verge of economic collapse. If Hezbollah drags the region into war, maybe it will get some respect from the Iranians, but at the same time, Nasrallah will be officially signed for Lebanon's destruction. Now, as for the IDF and the Northern Command, first priority is to be ready for that challenge that you mentioned. I'll be honest with you, it's not going to be a picnic. It's going to be a nasty war. As you know, I was there in the Second Lebanon War, and we used to deal with 200 rockets a day. Now we are talking about 1,500, even 2,000 rockets a day. But not like the Second Lebanon War. Israel understands that Lebanon as a state should be part of the game. We don't have anything against the Lebanese, but they host a very radical terror organization that avoids them from developing their country. Instead of spending money to make Lebanon again as Switzerland of the Middle East, they spend a lot of money on missiles and rockets, and they hide them among and within civilians.
Actually, what you just said.
So today, I would say that in our eyes, Lebanon is Hezbollah and Hezbollah is Lebanon.
And I understood it totally, because I remember the war and I covered it, and you were there as you were in the second Intifada. Actually, you were everywhere. But what you just said, the headline that you gave me, is that unlike the Ehud Olmert decision in 2006, Prime Minister Olmert, not to hit Lebanese infrastructure and to not to see Lebanon as responsible to the war, but Hezbollah. Right now, if war erupts, it's Lebanon will suffer, and there will be no distinction between Lebanon and Hezbollah. This is what you actually said, if I understood it right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to how do you think these agreements that we just spoke about, the agreements between Israel and the Gulf states, the warming ties with the Saudis, and the talk about additional agreements, is affecting the whole Shiite axis that stretches from Tehran to Beirut? Do you think they're just sitting and thinking what to do with this?
These agreements stand against the grand strategy of Iran. Make no mistake, the Iranians are very smart and they have patience, not like us. They are working patiently to implement their strategy, to spread their ideology, and to gain control on this part of the world. Peace and normalization with Israel block them from achieving their goals. It is almost as if you build a defense shield against their ambitions. More importantly, is that the people in these states, the Gulf states, not like in Egypt and Jordan, which we really appreciate, and we see the peace with Egypt and Jordan as a strategic asset, understand that Israel in many ways isn't anymore the problem of the region, but the solution.
Yes, this is a very important strategic development, and I agree with you again. And let's talk about November 3rd. The election in the United States is a type of watershed for the different rivals in the region. I'm talking especially about Tehran, Damascus, Moscow, Beirut, and Jerusalem. Do you think they will sit there at the November 3rd night and, be in a very high level of tension to see who is going to win the American election?
Let me make it clear, because I'm not a politician, so I can speak free, with no any commitment to anyone. I'm not an official representative of the state of Israel. Let me tell you that after the peace agreements, the U.S. election, after the peace agreements with the United Emirates and Bahrain, the U.S. election for the Iranians is almost the difference between life and death. The Iranians are waiting for Biden that will seek to renew, this is how they think, the so-called JCPOA, as you know.
Yes.
In Israeli eyes, it is completely disaster, which promises the Iranians a large arsenal of nuclear weapons in 10 years and regional hegemony by then, while Trump wants an agreement in which they will give up totally their nuclear program. So there is a big difference. Both candidates want to achieve any kind of deal with the Iranian, but there is a huge difference between the two.
Okay, I want to ask you a different question. I want to go back to the IDF. You were a general in the IDF and spent more than 30 years working on Israel's national security. There is no secret that the IDF is a leading force in technology, in cyber, in Air Force, drones, attacking drones, intelligence, sometimes it looks like the last chapter of Star Wars, but there is a lot of criticism from ex-generals like General Yitzhak Brick that we neglect, at the same time, we neglect the ground forces, what we call boots on the ground. I'm talking about infantry, about armored forces, about the people, the soldiers that will have to go and maneuver in behind enemy's line in order to win the next war. Do you think this criticism is real and justified, or do you count on the leadership of the IDF that keeps the level of the soldiers in a good shape?
So let me put it that way. First, there is no contradiction between the two. The investment in air intelligence and cyber, no doubt that strengthen the ground forces. It is no longer land maneuver, but a multidimensional maneuver. Take, for example, the aerial dimension of fighting in urban areas. And I was there in Lebanon, in Judea and Samaria. This combination will allow the battalion commander to expose the enemy and destroy him faster and more efficiently. Second, the idea behind multidimensional maneuver is primarily intended to strengthen I would say, the operational edge on the ground, to enable both accurate intelligence and real-time firepower for the platoon, company, or battalion commander. Having said that, it must be clear that new concept doesn't come instead of training full and ready warehouses, and of course, enough ground forces to meet the current challenges. I would add to that. I think it's fair to say that I commend the Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi, because it is the first time after 20 years that we base the structure of the IDF based on concept and not based on crisis, events, and so on. In other words, I would say that what the Chief of Staff is doing is to be prepared for war tomorrow morning, but at the same time to change the army to be ready for the next war and not for the last war.
Understood.
And I would add to that, many people are like those who critic this digital era that we are living in. I would ask you if you prefer or be willing to use today Nokia instead of smartphone.
Yes, you remind me the time that they let me in a brand new Merkava tank, and I knew the old ones, the first ones, and I was totally shocked. I want to ask you one question about the coronavirus, because one of your previous jobs in the army was head of the Home Front Command. And do you think that the command and the military should be in charge of handling the epidemic? After all, they have sophisticated emergency systems for just such a crisis. Was it a mistake not to do it from the very beginning?
So let's put it that way. First of all, the IDF from the very beginning is doing a lot of things to help the country to overcome the challenge. But let's take it to another level. We need to understand and recognize the fact that the state of Israel is dealing with system of systems, the health system, the economic system, the social and the security system. There will always be tension between the various systems. This tension must be regulated by the cabinet and the prime minister. They must determine a strategy, determine the policy, and let the executive bodies work. Therefore, to the question whether the army and especially the chief of staff should have conducted the event, the answer is negative. The army is in charge of the security system, which is working well. The chief of staff should not run the country and make decisions whether there is a quarantine or not, and certainly not economic decisions. But if you ask whether the National Emergency Authority should have been activated and the home front, the full home front command, as well as local authorities from the very beginning, the answer is absolutely yes. And in that regard, this is a big failure.
Okay, finally, General Gershon, I want to ask you a very small personal question. You were for years the IDF's representative of the Friends of the IDF organization in the United States. You got to know the warm American Jewish and expat Israeli community up close. What do you like to tell your friends back in the United States? Do you miss them?
So I want to tell you a story. When I got the job, actually I didn't want to go there. When I offered the job, I said it's not for me. I don't like to schnorrer. Actually, it's not a schnorrer. But my wife, you know, they are always right. She said, "What are you, nuts? Let's take it. After 32 years, most of them on the front line. Let's go to the United States, rest 3 years, and we'll come back to Israel." So I did, and I want to tell you a story about my first days in the Friends of the IDF. I met one of the senior employees, amazing woman. She was like 14 years, something like that, in the organization. So at the beginning of the conversation, I told her, "Barbara, I like to study. I'm very curious. I like to study, and I like criticism. If you feel my English is not good enough, please don't hesitate to correct me." She was very surprised. I said, it is the only way I'll improve myself. And then I asked her the first question in English. "Barbara, how long have you been serving in the organization?" And I marked the serving, and she was surprised. Her answer was, with a smile, "Hey, here is your first mistake. Here is your first mistake. Like, it's not serving, it is working. Your grammar is perfect, but it's not serving, it is working." Well, I said to Barbara, "I'm sorry. I do not accept this time your correction. I came here to serve the IDF soldiers and those who choose to support them. I don't miss the job over there, but I really miss the people that appreciate the fact that, thanks God, we have today the IDF and the State of Israel."
It's a great story, and I think the English speakers from between our listeners, I'm not sure they know. When we say in Israel, when you go to the army, you serve in the army service, and this is in Hebrew actually to be a soldier and defend your homeland. General Gershon, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. We'll be back with some final comments after this brief commercial break.
If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform, on Israel with Ben Caspit, and on the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi.
Thank you for staying with us. When listening to General Gershon, we have to acknowledge that he is fully aware of the fact that whatever he's just told us will be on Hassan Nasrallah's table within a few minutes. So this was actually a formal Israeli warning that defines the next war between Israel and Hezbollah as nasty, and claims aloud that the next time the Israeli government and the IDF will see the state of Lebanon as the sole responsible to the rockets Hezbollah is going to fire at Israel. Under these circumstances, it is obvious that the order to the IDF will be to destroy and hit Lebanese infrastructure and strategic targets. What is left to us is to hope that this war will not happen in our lifetime. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. We hope to see you next Monday here on Israel at Al Monitor. I'm Ben Caspit from Tel Aviv. Take care.